June 28, 1997, 11:34 p.m., Kensington Palace. The red light on the tape recorder blinked steadily in the darkness of Diana's private study. She sat alone, a single lamp casting amber shadows across the pale blue walls, her hands folded in her lap as she stared at the device on her desk. She had started and stopped this recording 3 times already. Each time, the words felt too dangerous, too revealing, too final. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, she felt the weight of premonition pressing against her chest, the sense that time was running out, that if she didn't speak her truth now, she never would. She pressed record one final time. "My name is Diana, Princess of Wales. Today is June 28, 1997. If you're listening to this, it means something has happened to me. It means I'm no longer here to tell my story myself. So I'm going to tell it now. All of it. The truth they never wanted anyone to know." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she continued. "Charles, if you're hearing this, I want you to know that I forgive you. For all of it. But I also want you to know what your silence cost. What the palace's lies cost. What protecting the institution cost. What Diana didn't know. What she couldn't have known as she poured her heart into that tape. Recorder was that 2 months later, she would be dead. That this recording would be found among her belongings by a staff member who would immediately recognize its explosive nature. That it would be seized by palace officials within hours. And that Charles would listen to it exactly once, alone in his study at Highgrove, before making a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because to understand what Diana said in those 47 minutes, to understand why this recording was immediately classified as the most dangerous piece of evidence in royal history, we have to go back to the beginning, back to when a 19-year-old girl married a prince and walked into a trap she wouldn't recognize until it was far too late. July 29, 1981, 10:47 a.m., St. Paul's Cathedral, London. Diana stood in the cathedral vestibule, her dress weighing what felt like 1,000 pounds, her hands ice-cold despite the summer heat. Through the doors, she could hear the congregation of 3,500 people waiting, the television cameras broadcasting to 750 million viewers worldwide. Her father squeezed her hand. "Ready, darling?" Diana wanted to say no, wanted to run, because 20 minutes earlier, her sister Jane had pulled her aside and whispered something that made Diana's blood freeze. "He told me last night that he doesn't love you, that he's doing this because it's his duty. Diana, you don't have to go through with this." Diana had stared at her sister, wedding makeup perfect, hair arranged to support the 25-foot train, every detail orchestrated for maximum spectacle. And she had made a choice, the first of many terrible choices. "I can't back out now. The whole world is watching." So she walked down that aisle. She said the words. She made the vows, and she became trapped. What she didn't know was that in a private room in Clarence House, Camilla Parker Bowles was watching the ceremony on television, wearing a bracelet Charles had given her the night before, a bracelet with the initials G and F, Gladys and Fred, their private pet names for each other. The marriage was a lie from the moment it began. And Diana, naive and desperate to believe in fairy tales, wouldn't understand the full depth of that lie for another 3 years. November 5th, 1984, 2:17 a.m., Kensington Palace. Diana woke to an empty bed. Again, Charles had left sometime after midnight, claiming he needed to work on papers. But Diana knew better. She'd known better for months now. She got up and walked through the silent palace, past rooms full of priceless antiques and historic paintings, until she found what she was looking for, Charles's study. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack she could hear his voice. "I can't do this much longer, darling. Being away from you, pretending. I miss you constantly." Diana's hand went to her mouth. She wanted to burst in, to confront him, to scream. But something stopped her. She listened. She suspects, I know she does, but she can't prove anything. And even if she could, what could she do? Leave? The palace would never allow it. She's the mother of the heir. She's trapped, and she knows it. Diana backed away from the door, her heart hammering. She walked back to her bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. She was 23 years old. She had 2 sons, and her husband was in love with another woman. The fairy tale was dead, but she was only beginning to understand how dead it really was. March 14th, 1989, 4:52 p.m., Highgrove House. Diana stood in the hallway outside Charles's bedroom, holding a small tape recorder she'd purchased from a shop in London. She'd been seeing a therapist who'd encouraged her to document things. "Keep a record," the therapist had said. "Not for anyone else, for yourself. So you know you're not crazy." Because the palace had been gaslighting her for years, telling her she was paranoid, overly emotional, unstable. Every time she confronted Charles about Camilla, he denied it. Every time she raised concerns with palace officials, they dismissed her. So she decided to gather proof. She turned on the recorder and held it near the door. Inside, Charles was on the phone. His voice was muffled but audible. "I want to feel my way along you, all over you and up and down you and in and out." Diana felt sick. She knew this wasn't the first call, knew it wouldn't be the last. But hearing it, actually hearing the intimacy, the longing, the love he'd never shown her was devastating. She turned off the recorder and walked away. That tape would become known as Camilla Gate when it was leaked years later. But what most people never knew was that Diana had a copy first, that she'd kept it as insurance, as proof, as evidence that she wasn't the unstable one. It was the first recording in what would become Diana's archive, a collection of tapes, documents, photographs, evidence. She was gathering for a truth she wasn't ready to tell yet, but she would be, eventually. December 12th, 1992, 9:23 p.m., Kensington Palace. Diana sat alone in her study, looking at the announcement that would be made public. The next day, she and Charles were separating. The marriage was over, publicly, officially, finally. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt terror, because earlier that day, a palace official had come to see her. He'd been polite, almost sympathetic, but his message was clear. "Your Royal Highness, you need to understand something. You have no power in this situation, none. You're divorcing the future king. The palace will control the narrative. If you fight us, if you try to tell your version of events, we will destroy you. We'll leak stories about your mental health, your relationships, your fitness as a mother. We'll make sure William and Harry are protected from your influence." Diana had stared at him. "Are you threatening to take my sons?" "We're explaining reality. You can exit this gracefully, maintain your title and your dignity, continue your charitable work, or you can fight us and lose everything. The choice is yours." After he left, Diana sat for a long time. Then she went to her private safe and pulled out the box of tapes, documents, photographs, evidence of Charles's affair, evidence of the palace's complicity, evidence of years of gaslighting and manipulation. She called her friend, James Colthurst, a doctor she'd known for years. "James, I need to tell my story. All of it, and I need you to help me." 2 weeks later, she would sit down with Andrew Morton, the journalist who would write Diana her true story, and she would start fighting back. But the palace was right about one thing. She was about to pay a terrible price for telling the truth. August 20th, 1995, 3:17 p.m., Kensington Palace. Diana was preparing for the interview, the one that would change everything. Martin Bashir had approached her months ago with promises of complete editorial control, of a platform to finally tell her story unfiltered. What she didn't know was that Bashir had forged bank statements to convince her that palace staff were spying on her, selling stories about her to the press. He'd manipulated her paranoia that was actually justified, but that he'd weaponized for his own purposes. But Diana didn't care about the manipulation anymore. She was past caring, because she had something even Bashir didn't know about: the recordings. Not just the Camilla tapes, but others. Conversations she'd recorded over the years. Charles talking to advisors about the Diana problem, palace. Officials discussing strategies to undermine her public image. Phone calls where they referred to her as unstable and a liability. She had considered releasing them, letting the world hear the truth in their own words. But her lawyer had advised against it. If you release secretly recorded conversations, it will backfire. People will see you as untrustworthy. Instead, tell your story. Let your words be the weapon. So on November 20th, 1995, Diana sat down with Bashir and spoke the words that would echo around the world. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. 23 million people watched. The palace scrambled, and Charles, watching alone in his study, felt something he'd never expected to feel: shame, but also anger, because Diana had declared war, and wars have consequences. February 28th, 1996, 11:47 p.m., Kensington Palace. Diana sat in her study, staring at a letter from the Queen. The message was clear. The divorce would proceed. Diana would lose her HRH title. She would receive a settlement, and she would cooperate with the palace's preferred narrative or face consequences. Diana picked up her phone and called Paul Burrell, her loyal butler. "Paul, I need you to keep something safe for me. A package. If anything happens to me, you need to make sure it gets to William when he's old enough to understand." "Ma'am, nothing is going to happen to you." "Paul, please, just promise me." "I promise." The next day, Diana gave him a sealed box. Inside were the tapes. All of them. The Camilla recordings, the palace conversations, and one more tape. A tape she'd just finished recording. The most dangerous one of all. Her final confession. June 28th, 1997, 11:34 p.m., Kensington Palace. And so we return to this moment. To Diana sitting alone, speaking into a tape recorder, knowing that what she was about to say could never be unsaid. "Charles, I know about all of it. Not just Camilla. I know about the conversations with your advisors. I know about the plans to undermine me. I know about the psych evaluations they wanted to force me to take. I know about the discussions of having me declared unfit as a mother." She paused, gathering strength. "But I also know something else. Something I discovered by accident 3 months ago. Something that explains everything." Diana reached into her desk and pulled out a document. A letter dated 1980 from the Queen Mother to Charles. She'd found it tucked into one of Charles's old diaries that had been left in storage at Kensington Palace. She read it aloud for the recording. "My dear Charles, I understand your reluctance to end the relationship with Camilla, but you must understand the necessity. The public will never accept a divorcee as Princess of Wales. Diana Spencer is young, malleable, and from an appropriate family. She will serve the purpose. Once you've produced heirs, you can be discreet about your personal arrangements. The marriage need not be a love match. It merely needs to appear as one." Diana set down the letter. "They knew, Charles. Before we were even married, they knew. Your grandmother, your parents, the palace advisors, they all knew this was a setup. I was selected like a broodmare, young enough to be controlled, naive enough to believe in fairy tales, perfect for producing heirs and then being quietly sidelined while you continued your real life with Camilla." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "I was 19 years old. I trusted you. I loved you. And you used me. All of you used me. And when I started to understand what was happening, when I started to fight back, you tried to destroy me. You called me crazy, unstable, paranoid. You leaked stories about my relationships while hiding yours. You threatened to take my sons from me." Diana wiped tears from her face. "But here's what you need to understand, Charles. I have evidence, recordings, documents, photographs. I have proof of all of it. And if anything happens to me, if I die in a car crash or a plane accident or anything that seems even remotely suspicious, I've arranged for all of it to be released. Every tape, every document, every ugly truth." She leaned closer to the microphone. "I've given copies to people you can't touch, people who will honor my wishes. If I die of natural causes as an old woman, they'll destroy the evidence. But if I die young, if I die suspiciously, the world will know everything. They'll know about the setup, the manipulation, the conspiracy to use a teenage girl as a pawn in your royal games." Diana took a shaky breath. "I don't want it to come to that. I want to live. I want to raise my sons. I want to do my charitable work and find happiness and grow old. But I need you to know that I'm not helpless anymore. I'm not the naive girl you married. I have power now, the power of truth." This is Diana, Princess of Wales, ending this recording on June 28, 1997. Whatever happens next, at least I know I've spoken my truth." She pressed stop. The tape clicked off, and Diana sat in the silence, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, free. August 31st, 1997, 12:23 a.m., Pont de l'Alma-Tunnel, Paris. 2 months later, Diana was dead. The official story was tragic but simple. A car crash caused by a drunk driver and aggressive paparazzi. An accident, a terrible, senseless accident. But within hours of the crash, palace officials were moving. They arrived at Kensington Palace with legal authorization to secure Diana's personal effects. They went through her study, her bedroom, her private spaces. And they found the safe. Inside was Paul Burrell's copy of the box, the tapes, the documents, the letter from the Queen Mother, and the final recording, the confession. Everything was seized, classified, locked away. Paul Burrell, who had Diana's original copy hidden at his home, was arrested years later on charges of theft. The charges were eventually dropped, but the message was clear. Anyone who had Diana's evidence was at risk. The tapes disappeared into palace vaults. Most of them were likely destroyed. But one tape, the final confession, was given to Charles. September 15th, 1997, 11:47 p.m., Highgrove House. Charles sat alone in his study. A glass of whiskey untouched on the desk beside him. The tape player in front of him. He'd been staring at it for an hour, unable to press play. His mother had given it to him with explicit instructions. Listen to it once. Decide what should be done. This cannot become public. Finally, he pressed play. For 47 minutes, he listened to Diana's voice, heard her pain, her anger, her truth, the letter from his grandmother, the accusations, the threats, the forgiveness. When it ended, Charles sat in silence for a long time. Then he took the tape from the player, walked to the fireplace, and threw it into the flames. He watched it burn, watched the plastic melt and curl, watched Diana's voice disappear into smoke and ash. The next morning, he told his mother it had been destroyed. But Charles had lied, because before he burned the tape, he'd made a copy. A copy he placed in his own private safe, locked away with a letter addressed to William, to be opened on his 40th birthday, because Charles understood something that night. Understood that William would one day be king, would one day face his own impossible choices, would one day need to understand what had happened to his mother and why. The truth couldn't be released now. It would destroy the monarchy, destroy everything they'd built, destroy Charles's chance to ever become king. But someday, when William was ready, he would need to know. And so the tape survived, hidden, waiting. Today, William turned 40 in 2022. According to those close to him, he received a letter from his father. What was in that letter? Whether it included information about the tape remains unknown. But those who know William say something shifted in him after that birthday, that he became more determined to modernize the monarchy, more protective of Catherine and his children's privacy, more willing to push back against palace protocol. Maybe he learned nothing, or maybe he learned everything. The tape, if it still exists, remains locked away. The letter from the Queen Mother has never been confirmed. Diana's evidence, collected over years of suffering, was scattered or destroyed. But Diana was right about one thing. Truth has a way of surviving, of finding cracks in even the most carefully constructed walls, of refusing to stay buried. Somewhere in some vault or safe or hidden location, Diana's final confession might still exist. 47 minutes of truth that the palace spent decades trying to erase. And maybe someday it will be heard. So here we stand at the end of this story, having walked through Diana's final act of defiance, a recording made in the shadow of premonition, a truth told in the face of power, a voice that refused to be silenced, even in death. What do you think was on that tape? What other truths might Diana have revealed? And do you believe William knows the full story of what happened to his mother? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is where we honor Diana's courage by refusing to let her story be rewritten, by demanding accountability from the institutions that failed her, by remembering that she was more than a princess. She was a woman who fought for her right to be heard. If this story moved you, please subscribe. There are more hidden truths waiting to be told, stories about Diana's final months, her desperate attempts to protect her sons, her knowledge of the forces working against her, stories the palace never wanted revealed. Together, we'll make sure every word she spoke is finally heard. Together, we'll demand the truth.